Hey everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Cyril Landgren. I live in Gothenburg in Sweden. I am an artist. I'm trained in composition and sound art. Nowadays I do other stuff as well. For example, text-based work as well as sound. My presentation is called Perfect Faults, Tools for Perfection and What to Do with Them. Perfection and its tools. Our culture is obsessed with perfection. It goes by many names: purity, authenticity, naturalness, sellability, or drop-dead gorgeousness. But regardless, we are constantly measured, compared, passed, or more often failed. And when a culture is obsessed with perfection, few feel this pressure as acutely as trans people. We are portrayed as inauthentic, incomplete, often disgusting, as existing in a void between the real categories allowable to human life. But we also use tools that the majority population doesn't have. We take hormones, we use the latest surgical techniques to reshape our bodies. We invent new words and concepts to describe our lives, identities, and experiences. These are not tools that we are magically granted through our powers of transness. They are in principle available to everyone. We claim them out of necessity, out of spite, to ease our suffering. And when we are denied them through legislation, bureaucracy, or oppression, we take them anyway. We self-medicate, we pool resources and knowledge, teach each other to hack the systems. When the world rejects us, we become masters of self-improvement. This connects us to transhumanist ideas. The shared usage of the term trans may look like a coincidence, but can also be viewed as hinting at a deep connection. This presentation will deal with perfection, improvement, augmentation, how it is demanded of us, what tools are developed and sold to us to try to attain it, and how we can use those tools for other ends. The production of beauty and desire. The struggle for perfection may be most easily identified in the production of desirable bodies, something influencer booties and Brazilian butt lifts keeps us well aware of. But I argue that it happens just as much in the production of beautiful and desirable voices. My essay, Technology of the Voice, describes this in more detail. There will be a slide at the end with links to all the works and sources that I reference. As I see it, scalpels, packers, strap-ons, Tostrex, padding, Viagra, estradiol, and Botox serve the same purpose as pop shields, exciters, compressors, de-essers, auto-tuners, and equalizers in producing desirable bodies. By the late 20th century, our time, a mythic time, we are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. In short, cyborgs. Late 20th century machines have made thoroughly ambiguous the difference between natural and artificial. Donna Haraway's 1985 Cyborg Manifesto suggests that we embrace our impurity and composite nature as a kind of resistance to the unattainable and oppressive norms and categories our society forces on us. It has since sown the seeds to a whole ecosystem of radical thought. One of these seeds grew into the 2015 Xenofeminist Manifesto, written by a collective under the pseudonym Laboria Cubonics. The manifesto is freely available online as a custom-built website, something which hints at the hacker ethic that underlies both the manifesto and this presentation. These two manifestos have supplied me with a source of ideas and, no less important, a sense of community. Falseness and failure. In our culture's constant struggle for perfection, a viable strategy is to deny others authenticity and success when you can't attain it yourself. My performance lecture, The Voice is False, describes how the standards for vocal perfection or authenticity have affected minds and bodies throughout Western history. The work is a sort of love child of Erik Binger's A Lecture on Schizophrenia and the Know Your Meme episode about autotune featuring Weird Al Yankovic. It was important to me that the voice in the performance that discusses this culture of perfection and disapproval should itself take part in the memes it describes, should use the very tools and techniques that it talks about. The work begins with a summary of the various ways in which a voice can be deemed false.
The voice is false. The voice is false. False, like the copy is false. A reproduction of an original, inauthentic, artificial, synthetic, forced. The voice is false, like the hybrid is false. A mix of several originals. The false voice speaks pidgin, speaks Creole. The voice is false, as in incomplete, lacking. Singing a false note means singing out of tune, not living up to standards, performing below the expected and desired. The voice is false, like the liar is false, deceitful, dishonest. False, like that which appears to be X, but which is, in fact, Y. The voice is false, like the tempter is false, trying to make you desire something you don't really want. The voice is false. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Let me tell. Let me tell you why the voice is false.
How is the volume? Thank you. Volume good? Good? Nice. The lecture then proceeds to talk about realness in popular music production, how the real T-Pain is defined by the sound of autotune, an audio plugin which at the same time makes your voice perfect but also inauthentic, and how the market was soon flooded with false T-Pains, mere imitators of the auto-tuned original. It covers the vocal register known as falsetto, how its very name denotes falseness, how it has been described as the unnatural voice, supposedly weaker and more limited than the modal voice we use for speech, how it is associated with adolescent boys when their involuntary lapses into falsetto, and thus has an air of something unfinished, incomplete. It then goes into the battle that took place over the high registers in European sacred music and opera.
Italy, the middle of the 16th century. A tradition is born which will endure for more than 300 years, having a significant impact on the development of classical music. Young boys showing a talent for singing are castrated to prevent their voices from changing due to the effects of puberty. Following Paul the Apostle's dictum in his first epistle to the Corinthians,
women must keep silent in church.
there was a lack of high voices in the chapels. Also, in the Papal States, by this time encompassing most of central Italy, women were banned from performing on theatrical stages. In the early days of opera, however,
A high voice
was associated with heroism and erotic attractiveness. This meant that the leading male roles of any opera would be sung in the alto or soprano registers.
Obviously, countertenors were common.
The critics were harsh, though, and showing any trace of your manly chest voice was revealing a crack in the facade, reminding your audience of the terrible falseness of your voice,
Of the improper methods
involved in producing it. Enter the castrati as the beautiful solution to this problem. Their voices, unspoiled by the ravages of puberty, would save opera goers from the false tongues of countertenors.
Unlike the fallible falsetto,
Castrati would deliver a performance brilliant enough to allow their audience to truly believe in the miracle, that this is the true voice of this body. The true voice, the voice of this body.
So, what's a queer to do? In light of all this competition, enforcement, falseness, and disapproval, what can we do? If we ask the Xenofeminist Manifesto, what we can't do is pretend it's not there, something the contemporary music scene could be said to have been guilty of, at least in the past. To secede from or disavow capitalist machinery will not make it disappear. We want neither clean hands nor beautiful souls, neither virtue nor terror. We want superior forms of corruption. But we can play. We can grab the tools meant for the production of perfection and take them for a spin. Cyborg writing is about the power to survive, not on the basis of original innocence, but on the basis of seizing the tools to mark the world that marked them as other. This speaks to what I do in my work, Sången om glottisspringan, which translates to something like Song of the Glottal Crevice. It is a work for live improvisation with voice and electronics. The plugins, which it's based on, include auto-tune, multi-tap delay, exciter, and compressor, tools essential for the production of vocal perfection in the popular music sphere. I use a max patch to map faders and knobs on a MIDI interface to gradual changes in the parameters of these plugins. Aesthetically, the work gleans on influences like Maja Ratche and Hannah Hartmann. One kind of play is to take an audio plugin like Autotune and give it inputs it's not expecting. For example, we can set it to only allow the pitches D and G sharp and sing a note hovering right in the middle of the interval around F. We can fit it a sound that has a clear pitch, but that is not part of everyday singing techniques, like forcing air through a closed glottis, like we can whistle, or in my case, fail to whistle into it. We can use microtonal and non-equal tempered scales, and this is to me one of the most interesting points. Autotune is meant to produce perfection by aligning a shaky vocal effort neatly onto the diatonic scale. Using the hardest settings, any fluctuation in pitch is eliminated, producing a sound that sounds precise and intentional. But what if you use a microtonal scale, and yes, Antares' own Autotune plugin actually supports this? Then we achieve the sound of a singer precisely and intentionally missing the diatonic scale. Ears accustomed to popular music will hear this as out of tune. Yet those ears also know that this isn't a sound of a bad singer. Singing out of tune never takes the form of exactly missing the intended pitch by a fixed number of cents, but instead is wobbly, a sure sign of insecurity. The artifacts Autotune leaves on articulation and timbre make our ears aware that this plugin is being used. And since it is so associated with popular music, suggests that the voice should be using an equal tempered scale. But the precision and unwavering insistence on a non-equal tempered pitch is also impossible to ignore, suggesting that the singer is in fact performing perfection. A further wrinkle is that to someone grown up on Western classical and popular music, microtonal singing is harder to pull off than equal tempered singing. This means that nailing a microtonal interval suggests an even higher degree of perfection than what T-Pain and his cohorts perform, while at the same time running the risk of being read as a complete failure. I myself have close to zero experience in non-equal tempered singing, and since I'm using several microtonal scales that I continuously switch between, the resulting pitch palette is way beyond what my musical ear can grasp. This means that when I sing a note, I often have no idea what pitch will come out the other end of the autotuner. The plugin then becomes a sort of play partner for me, rather than a simple subordinated tool. And the Cyborg Manifesto says, this essay is an argument for pleasure in the confusion of boundaries. When it comes to the multi-tap delay, I found it very enjoyable to continuously change the delay time of the taps, confusing the plugin and creating some beautiful glitches. This often makes me feel like I'm surrounded by an erratic swarm of copies of my own voice buzzing around me like insects, in a way making me feel protected. I didn't realize at first, but it was this very aspect of play that allowed Sången om Glottisbringan to grow from a mere examination of digital tools to a platform where I could explore aspects of my body sonically. For example, in my more recent performances of the work, it started to come out more as a celebration of the mouth as an organ of pleasure. Freedom is not a given, and it's certainly not given by anything natural. The construction of freedom involves not less, but more alienation. Some closing words from transcendence to immanence. These tools were originally intended to elevate the imperfect toward perfection. Here, our fixed point is this unattainable ideal, a sort of ceiling which we can aim for but never transgress. And failure is defined as falling short of that ceiling. But if we switch our perspectives, instead of having our fixed point at the top, we can set it at the bottom. Then the tools we play with, as well as our body and person, become a baseline from which we depart. From here, the only way is up. You might call it a switch from transcendence to immanence, from striving to overcome limitations to become the other, to growing a garden in the soil you already have. Some closing words from the Xenofeminist Manifesto. Why is there so little explicit, organized effort to repurpose technologies for progressive gender political ends? Xenofeminism seeks to strategically deploy existing technologies to re-engineer the world. Serious risks are built into these tools. They are prone to imbalance, abuse, and exploitation of the weak. Rather than pretending to risk nothing, xenofeminism advocates the necessary assembly of techno-political interfaces responsive to these risks. Technology isn't inherently progressive. Its uses are fused with culture in a positive feedback loop that makes linear sequencing, prediction, and absolute caution impossible. Techno-scientific innovation must be linked to a collective, theoretical, and political thinking in which women, queers, and the gender non-conforming play an unparalleled role. Here are the sources I have referenced. And I think we have a couple of minutes if anyone has a question. Or you can talk to me after. I don't see any hands, so I will thank you for your time.